Make sure you guys stay tuned to the end of the video if you want to know my story of my first knockout in Holland, which wasn't bouncing. That one was actually before I bounced, but that's at the end of the video. And that was at a gym. But this is how I started basically doing wheel kicks in Holland. And that was before many street fights. So make sure you guys watch that part.
Kunnen we iets rustiger aan doen? De beveiliging is wel goed, maar ik denk wel niet dat ze... overal. Nou ja, ik vind het niet overal, omdat ik het gewoon de ergste heb meegemaakt. Ik vond het niet normaal.
I love the violence. The violence is the best part of it. If there was no violence, then I wouldn't be bouncing. You know, I'd be fucking home picking flowers or something. After being there a couple of hours, you start to get tired when you're not doing anything. But the minute a fight comes about, man, it's like the adrenaline flows in there and you're fucking boom. When there's fights, I don't mind being there till 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. When there's nothing really happening, I don't want to be there. The violence is what keeps me motivated.
Somebody asked me one time, how do you take a person out of the club? I said, quite easily. How's that? I said, unconscious. One shot in the jaw. And that's usually the end of the story.
I wish if I had my way, I'd just go around smacking people I don't like. But it's not good for work. I hope and pray. I'm like, man, I hope this guy does something. I love to put my foot up his ass. So I could only sit there and hope he crossed the line.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Bouncer Stories Holland, the beginning. Netherlands, Holland. If you haven't seen my Bouncer Stories from Mexico, watch my first video on that from 2 weeks ago. That was the very beginning of my very beginning of my bouncer career. I'm gonna fast forward now from then. That was back when I was 20 years old. I'm gonna fast forward now 10 years later. So 10 years later, I moved to the Netherlands after bouncing in Mexico. After all of that, I moved to the Netherlands to start from scratch again with my wife and daughter at the time, ex-wife now. So I will start from the very beginning. Now, when I first got to Holland, I went to live in the same town where I lived as a kid for 4 years. Same town that my grandparents are from and my mother, etc. So when I first got there, of course, I started immediately with the kickboxing because I love kickboxing, I love martial arts in general. So I started kickboxing in one gym and then didn't like it there. Ended up going to another gym. And then there I actually saw Leontine for like the first time again. She actually trained with me. No, not with me per se, but she was also a student when I was training as a kid in Steenwijk in Holland. So I was taking karate and kickboxing, and she was also taking both. And but we didn't really interact much. We just sort of knew each other like from class, you know. And then when I came back to Holland, she was one of the students in the class that I took. That said, she also worked in the coffee shop, which is, you know, where you can legally buy weed in the Netherlands. And you can buy it and smoke it there. So she was working in the shop for a lot of years, like 15 plus years at the time already. And so basically, we started talking, you know. I went there a few times and then we just started talking. She asked me about the kickboxing. I ended up, you know, going there on a regular basis and we would chit chat. And she basically worked right at the spot where you walk in, where you buy the weed. So she was actually the one selling the weed behind the counter. So I would sometimes bring a chair there and I would sit there with her like pretty much every day or every other day, you know. So we talked a lot. So she knew my background from Mexico, my martial arts background and everything, you know. Because we would basically talk a lot about everything. She would tell me stories about her life. I would tell her stories about mine, and you know, we talked a lot about Mexico. I would show her pictures. I had my Mexican phone at the time, so I showed her a lot of stuff from the clubs. I filmed a lot of stuff from the Mexican clubs, which I'll share with you guys at some point later in the stories. But I shared a lot of the stuff with her, and you know, she shared a lot of stuff with me, and I would hang out there a lot. One of the things I would do is take off my Mexican glasses, which were a pair of Pradas, to be able to see behind me. I would set them up like that. I'd be able to see everything that goes on behind me, so everyone who's leaving or who's behind me. and in the front I'd be able to see because I was facing the front of the entrance. So I was basically always keeping an eye on everything. It was just instinct. It was just automatic. I wasn't doing it for any other reason. That's just the way I was, you know. Extreme PTSD mixed up with training and experience. I would just know everything what's around me. I'm still like that, but not to the point that I set up glasses to see what's behind me. I don't do that anymore. I just look around me once in a while, you know. But in Mexico, it was like if I sat anywhere, I would see the exits, put the glasses there, make sure I can see any blind spot that I would have. I would set the glasses up in a way that I could see behind me. Anyway, so you know, she asked me what's up with that. Why are you doing that? Why are you looking at your glasses so much? And I explained to her what I was doing and everything. And then this place, this coffee shop, has a capacity of how? What's the capacity, Leo? What's the capacity again?
150.
So like 150 people total, like including a big line stretching to the outside from people that cannot sit down because there's no more space to sit. So sometimes that would happen, especially in the beginning of the day, you know. Anyways, I would sit there and analyze a lot of things. Like I would analyze who is who, what they're up to, who's suspicious, who's a criminal, who's not, who's a fighter, who can fight, who cannot fight, who's a wimp. Basically all of these kind of things, you know, who's perverted or not. All of these kind of things, and I would ask her, you know, how many times was I right out of the people? And people that I don't know, keep in mind, just from watching them. How many times was I right? Like, out of 10 times?
9 out of 10.
So, like, yeah, like 9 times out of 10, more or less, I was right. So she started to realize, like, what did you think then when I was right about people I didn't even know?
Yeah, it's crazy that you see that just by looking at them and observing them.
Yeah, so basically I was already acting like I was the security of the place without really being the security of the place. And it's not like I was aiming at being the security there because they didn't have security. Like, they never had security there before me either, right?
No.
So just out of weird coincidence, and I even thought of myself like that, even though I wasn't, like almost like you're visualizing things. And I did this with other jobs before where I just ended up getting the job just by visualizing it. So visualization is very, very powerful. Even when you're not trying to attract something, sometimes you just attract it because you visualize it so much. But the government basically made it mandatory, right? That there has to be a bouncer at the front door, or else it couldn't open anymore because of all the complaints, especially from the neighbors in the front. Because be this it may, you know, like Steenwijk, even though there's only, how many people living in Steenwijk? How many?
17,000.
About 17,000 people live in this city. So it's a very small city, especially if you compare it to Amsterdam. So, but still though, even though it's a very small city, it's right next to Amsterdam with drug problems. So for the size and proportion, it has enough drug problems basically, you know. So I kind of would spot that with the people, and she basically confirmed it. She's actually the one that told me that. You're the one that told me, right? That it's like right up there with Amsterdam and stuff. I was like, oh, that's crazy, you know. And I started researching it and all this kind of things, and that's I was like, okay, that's kind of crazy. But anyways, then when it became mandatory, and the owner asked her, you know, if she knew anybody that could be a good candidate, right, for to be a bouncer at the bar, the hash bar, coffee shop. We call it coffee shops here, but it's actually a hash bar, weed bar, whatever. They don't sell alcohol though. Only anything other than alcohol. They sold drinks, whatever, but no alcohol. Just in this one in particular, just weed. In Amsterdam, you do have some that sell both, or that they sort of combine it, right?
Yeah.
Where you're allowed to smoke with it, some you're not. It depends, right, on where you're at and what kind of permits you get, what kind of permission you have, whatever, tolerance. But anyways, when the owner asked her if she knew anybody, actually I haven't even asked you this. What did you tell her exactly?
Well, that you would fit the job perfectly, that you have experience in different countries, and you're not from there, so it's actually perfect to have you there.
Yeah. So so basically all I had to do is get the paper, do the studying, which I explained already in the previous video. In the Mexican voucher stories, I kind of explained the differences. So if you haven't seen that one, see that one. We'll link it down below or right over here. And so there I really explained of how you go about getting your security papers. It's kind of easy, but at the same time it's complicated. So you guys should look into how I had to go through all that. How long did it take more or less for me to get it? Like a month?
Yeah.
A month and a half, and I had my diploma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just had to get the okay from the chief of police. And I was pretty much standing at the door. In the meantime, though, she didn't want any men. She only wanted women, which I thought was a terrible idea, but I didn't say nothing because, you know, I told her it was a terrible idea, but she basically explained how stubborn the owner was. So Yeah, basically she just wanted women, so she got some women, right? She got like two different women that were working the door, and I was still there without working, and people still didn't know that I was gonna be the guard, but I was there even more than, kind of like Dalton and Roadhouse, you know, checking everything out. The only difference between me and Dalton there is that I was checking the place out for days, a month, over a month, and before that I had already been doing it for like 4 months, 5 months. So you guys can just imagine how well I already knew everything that was going on there, pretty much almost everything. So it was perfect for me to start there. And also, you know, the town Steenwijk has a nickname for Steakwijk, which means stabbing, because so many stabbings happened there. And it's just true. When I was a kid there, everybody carried a knife. I even carried a knife when I was a kid there. It was just normal, right? It's still normal now. So the first thing I did is I got this baby. This is a vest, right? Because I know if I have my vest on under the clothing, and this one is perfect for over the clothing too, you know? So a normal vest, usually you put it on this way, you know, and you tie it from the front. But this is a special one. You can wear it with suits and everything, and people can't even tell you're wearing a vest. It's super light. It's stab-proof, bulletproof. You know, they expire after 5 years, and I've had it for like 8 now, so it's pretty much expired. But I still have it, you know, in case I need it. Sometimes I don't use it anymore, really, for a while now. But I bought that thing. And then you're not really allowed to carry anything here as a guard, as a bouncer. So I really looked in deep if I could carry anything at all. And then we found out about the Smurf paint, which is funny because it's like pepper spray. It looks like pepper spray. It looks like a weapon. I bought a holster for it and everything. And I would put it on my belt. And I bought a holster for my phone too. And I put that one on my belt. So it kind of looked like I was armed, which I wasn't. Even a few people asked me outside if I worked for Newhall, for the government, if I was doing some kind of government law enforcement thing there, you know, because they've never seen anyone stand there, and the clothing that I was wearing was sort of similar to the police at the time. It was black pants, white shirt. They wore blue pants, white shirt with buttons. It was before they had the new uniforms, right?
Yeah.
So it was kind of confusing for some people that didn't know what was up. I was in the front there kind of looking almost like law enforcement. And even some rumors started going around town that I was actually a security guard, but undercover law enforcement. Like all these weird rumors started with people once I started working the door there. But basically, yeah, when I started working there, it was quite I already knew everything. Also, another thing that happened before I even worked there, it's I knocked somebody out. Like my first knockout, I'm also going to talk about it because it's relevant. My first knockout happened around the same time that we were talking, right? So around the same time that we were talking, before I even got the job, I knocked somebody out at the gym, at Sport Inn, it's called. It's one of the kickboxing gyms, the third kickboxing gym that I had visited in a few months. And basically what happened there is when I first got there, I didn't tell anybody who I was. I didn't tell anybody I was a black belt or any of this stuff. I just basically started training there, acted like sort of like a beginner. That way I didn't have to spar right away because I know how hard they spar here. I got my ass kicked enough as a kid to know better that I didn't want to get my ass kicked again. I had the skills to figure everybody out anyway. So I started studying everybody. I started always showing up to sparring class too, watching everybody spar, just training, acting like I don't know much, taking all the information in that things that I didn't know, maybe that I had forgotten about, you know, getting my low kicks, getting used to everything again, taking them, giving them. I trained with Leontine too. We were training together before I knocked this guy out. We were training at her garage, at her brother's garage. We were doing different kind of training in the cold. We're taking the low kicks with no shin guards in the cold below zero. So I was doing hardcore training, you know. Then I was getting ready also at some point for this job because I knew I was gonna get it. And I was basically doing hard sparring because I also thought to myself, if I gotta deal with all of these people at this bar, some of them can kickbox, some of them are huge, I better be able to deal with them in sparring, at least. At the very least, if I want to be able to have a chance, right? Because I wasn't used yet to dealing with people that big all the time. You know, with bouncing in Mexico and bouncing in LA, it's not the same thing as bouncing here in Holland as far as when you actually get into a fist fight and have to throw people out. So I figured, you know what, I better get used to this now. So eventually I started sparring. At first I started with the instructor and, you know, I actually kicked him with a wheel kick in the face, but I just tapped him. I didn't do it hard and he was surprised. He thought it was like a lucky shot or like I had a lot of natural talent or something. But then later after that session, I told them straight up that I was a black belt. It was like time to tell them. I already figured everybody out anyways. So then they started telling me, go ahead, kick us hard, kick us hard. And I was like, no, we were just talking though. I was like, no, I'm not going to kick you guys hard. You don't know what you're talking about. Because keep in mind, in Holland, the level in Taekwondo is very low. At the time, even lower than now, I think. But, so they don't really know these kind of kicks and how much power they have. Like, they're used to kicking each other in the head here with limited amount of power because they don't train high kicks so much, with the exceptions of the ones that really go crazy and really train it a lot on their own. But that said, in class itself, it's not like a majority thing. It's not like you're training a lot of high kicks. So when you're really fast with high kicks here and things like that, they're not used to it. So they didn't think I had that much power behind it, I guess. And I told them, no, you don't want to be wheel kicked by me. Like, you guys don't know what you're talking about, you know? Like, it's better that I control. It's not always good to go full out with everything when someone can really kick hard, you know? And, you know, they kind of didn't bite. Anyways, but I caught all of them that day with spin kicks in the head without hurting them. It was more of a private training that day. There wasn't that many people. It was like in a weekend, I think. Anyways, and then the sparring day came. And I was already sparring a few days, but there was this guy named Jan, actually same name as me. My second name is Jan. He was really tall, like about 6'2", 6'3", maybe. Skinny, tall, Dutch guy in his maybe late 30s, early 40s. He had quite a bit of experience. He'd been doing it actually since I was a kid, since the 90s. So he'd been doing it for a while. And yeah, he was actually the one beating everybody up in the gym every time they sparred. And because he was so much taller than everybody else, he didn't have to kick that high to reach some people in the head, like, for example, me. But I had already read that one of his best kicks was like the shovel roundhouse kick with left towards the liver. He will catch people a lot with that, only he will go to the head. Like the regular liver level for him is basically almost my head or my jaw. So that day, he had also seen me spar a little bit, but I hadn't really effed anybody up yet. I was taking it easy, you know. I was doing what they do, not really going above their level. But that day, we start sparring, and he just gets in front of me with a face, like, with a smirk, like, I'm going to kick your ass, you know, like, today's the day. It's enough of your splits and kicking crap. Like, he really thought that he could take me, you know. And then the instructor looked at him like, oh, you're going to spar AJ, huh? He's like, yeah. I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. I was like, alrighty then. And the class was full. There was a lot of people in that class. I might add that because it's relevant later. And basically, we start sparring. I'm in my fighting stance. If I could have recorded this, I would have recorded this. I started recording once I was actually teaching classes. But anyways, we start sparring, and the first thing he did was like go jab. He shoveled and he kicked me as hard as he could with left in the head. But I was already expecting that. I was already waiting for him to throw that kick. I've already learned enough that the best thing you can do is expect the unexpected. And if you already know someone has a move, then expect that move, you know? So he kicked me. I blocked. And he moved me about maybe 1 meter. How much is a meter in the feet right now? I don't know. But about 1 meter, 2 meters that way. About maybe like about 6 feet in that direction. He moved me after I blocked it. I moved that way. You know, I used my legs. I moved. I kept my distance for about 30, 40 seconds. I let him throw a lot of stuff. He missed, kept missing, kept missing. He didn't even get any low kicks in. I checked some of them. I moved back with some of them. I was just waiting for him to throw that left again. I was just waiting for him to shovel again. You know, and basically he did. And when he did, instead of blocking, as soon as he shoveled, because they're letting you know with the shovel that the kick is coming, I wheel kicked him as hard as I could, like really hard. And keep in mind, I modified my wheel kick though for it to work on kickboxers, because I had already realized that the typical way taekwondo wouldn't work if they block or if they have their guard up. So I found a way to get my foot around either behind them or over their head. So I basically used that new technique that I was practicing, and I just let him have it really, really hard. And it was a counter kick. He was kicking while I was kicking him as well. So he was going with left, I was going with right. So this happened to him. Boom. And he dropped really fast, really hard. I hit him right, like exactly in the cheekbone. I was actually aiming more towards like his jaw, temple, like right here. The doctor did say if I had actually connected there, he would have died. The cheekbone is one of the hardest bones in the human body. It's really hard. It's the hardest bone in the skull. So if you get shot here, a lot of times you do survive it as well. So it broke. The cheekbone broke. His left cheekbone broke. Also, his left side also broke. They both broke. This one dropped and this one broke from the pressure, I guess. I didn't even know that was possible, honestly. But he almost needed eye surgery. He ended up having surgery on his face. But anyways, at the time when I kicked him, he dropped. He was full of blood. His nose was full of blood. He had a cut here. And his face swelled up pretty badly. And he was completely out. You know, only one person saw it that was sitting there watching. The rest were all basically sparring. Not even the So nobody else saw it. Not even the instructor. The only person that saw it, actually, the angle he caught it from, he thought it was a spinning back fist or some kind of punch. He actually didn't see my foot hitting his face. So he actually asked me immediately when the guy was out. He came up and asked me. Everybody was like concerned. The instructor ran over there. All the people stopped and they were all like looking at him and looking at me because he was beating everybody up, and I basically knocked him out cold. So the guy that saw it walked up and asked me. He's like, I saw it. Well, sort of saw it. Like what did you hit him with? You know, like was it a back fist? Was it a punch? And I didn't really feel like answering. I was more like almost felt like bitch slapping him. Like, hey, dude, shut up. You know, like someone just got hurt. Don't be like this excited. We're not in a kickboxing tournament. Like this is serious. You know. So I basically didn't answer. I was like, you know, I didn't say nothing. And then he started telling some people that it was a punch. So. But it wasn't. I mean, I could say and brag that it was a punch, but there's no way you do that kind of damage with a punch, you know. Not even pros, I don't think, do that. Like that has to be bone against bone, you know. Like that kind of damage is not done with gloves. So they're looking at him. Maybe about a minute passed by that he was out, and really oddly he got back up. Like he sat back up with his body like that, and I was quite far from him. There was a lot of people around. And what I found very strange is that he made eye contact with me from like a distance. It was very weird how he immediately, his eyes went right towards me. It was freaky, man. It was really freaky. And then we all thought he was recovering, right? But nah, dude. He was sat like that for like 8 seconds. And he went back down again. And luckily the instructor was, so he's able to hold his head so he didn't hit his head like a second time on the mat. And then they had to call the ambulance, and they called the ambulance. He didn't wake up anymore. He was completely knocked out. I thought he was going to die. Like, seriously, I didn't think he was going to make it. I mean, I've knocked out people like that before, but usually I never get to know how they end up afterwards, you know? So usually like we drag them out of the club or whatever, but I didn't, I was not used to like that even in clubs or whatever before. The only times I've actually used spinning kicks in street fights had actually been only one time as a teenager, and the guy blocked it. And I used a sweep also once in a fight, and it didn't end well either that day. Those are for another story though. But basically, I've used it before in street fights, so I didn't really trust it anymore. I've like had knocked out people before in sparring and in tournaments with it, but I hadn't really knocked anybody out in street fights with it until I got to Holland. So it's actually what I'm getting at. Even though this fight was in the gym, it led up to a lot of knockouts later in street fights because I used the technique of going through the guard and, you know, going right through and right to the head without them expecting it. The thing is here, people are not used to you kicking fast to the face. In Mexico, if you start to kick and people see it, they can almost expect it because a lot of people know Taekwondo. On the contrary, though, in Mexico, if I throw a low kick, or even in LA, when I threw low kicks, like Dutch style low kicks, they would fall. I would really fuck them up with just low kicks to the knee or to the leg, whatever. But here in Holland, if you do that, a lot of people know how to take low kicks, so it's not gonna work like it does there. They know how to take it. A lot of them are strong, so you gotta go for something that people don't expect. And here, fortunately for me here, they don't really expect wheel kicks out of nowhere like that, at that kind of speed. So that helped me a lot to be able to use these things. And you know, I got arrested more than once for it. And
complaints from all over town, you're gonna have to stop with the kicking.
Oh, yeah? I think...
But anyways, he was taken out in the ambulance. Everybody's mood went down a bit. Later on, I was offered to teach there. Like the instructor was not able to teach at some point after this knockout, and they asked me if I could teach, and I kind of cleared out that class. A lot of people got scared. Nobody was scared before that day. Like everybody had like, you know, everybody had been doing for a while. Like they were pretty ballsy, you know. But a lot of people stopped going that were newbies, and a lot of people that were doing it for a while also stopped going. And the day that I taught class, actually very few people went. The kids class was like normal, you know, pretty much. I taught that class fine. But then like the first day I went, the adult class was only like a few kids that showed up. Like for the most part, nobody else showed up. Remember I told you that, Leo? Yeah. Nobody showed up. I don't know what they thought, if I was gonna be like, everyone is sparring me today or something like that. I just start knocking everybody out. But I mean, no, that's not even how the class went. It was a pretty good class, and the kids that showed up really did great. And you know, I taught class a few times. I don't remember how many times I taught class. You remember? Because by then I was already doing. By the time I taught class, I was already doing bouncing work. So it was shortly after I knocked out. I was already standing at the door. So you remember how long I taught there? Like a week, 2 weeks. I don't know how long it was. But a day came that they asked me to teach, and I couldn't because I my job at the door was like full time. I basically worked like the whole week, sometimes 7 days a week. So I would work every day. They would open like during the week from 4 till 10 or 11.
12.
From 4 to 12. Oh yeah, from 4 to 12, 5 days a week, and then in the weekends from 12 to 12. So I would work most of the time every day. I would take sometimes a break or a day off, and then they would replace me with the girls. That wasn't a good idea. Sometimes I would even show up in uniform even though I wasn't getting paid for it because I knew that I had a hard time at the door. So those pictures you see of me standing with them, I was actually there on my time off, helping them out a little bit before my shift would start. Or even on my days off, sometimes I would just show up for the hell of it. So I never really had much days off. If I was off, I would show up there in regular clothes, so I was still there. So people saw me there anyways, you know. It's like sometimes they would come in, like thinking, oh, he ain't here. They would come in like that, and they'd be like, ah, fuck, he's sitting right there, and I'd be sitting there next to her in the bar. So yeah, I was there. I was annoying to a lot of people, and of course I did end up throwing a lot of people out and things like that. So a lot of people were annoyed by me, but basically I will start like the real stories of how I bounced in my next video. And by the way, I did see the guy afterwards. After I knocked him out, we went, me, the instructor, and the owner of the gym, all three of us from Sport In. We went and saw the guy, and you know, nice house, nice family, really big house. He was like really rich, I think, because he had a super huge mansion, very very nice house. And he's like a computer guy. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting him to be like a construction worker or some rough job like that, because that's like how he looked at in the class. You know, I expected him to have some kind of rough job, but no, he was like some kind of computer guy, and made pretty good money. And you know, his face was completely green here, and he didn't really remember what happened. Because he asked me, you know, like, what happened, you know? Like, I heard that I did throw a few punches and kicks before I went down. I was like, yeah, actually, you threw a lot. But the main thing is you threw a high kick. And when I was moving back, you were angry. You told me to stay where you are. Bleib down. And I was like, I told you, you fight how you want, I fight how I want. And you kept insisting with the high kick, so I went for one myself, and then you were out, I told him, you know, like. So basically, yeah, man, we talked, you know. I was so not used to that. Like, I have never, like, that experience I still haven't had again. I've never went and visited someone after I knocked them out. That was like really, remember how weirded out I was by it. I was like, this is just strange to me, you know, like who dan, you know, who dan, they would say in Dutch. Like, even other people that I've seen, like either students of mine that have knocked out other people in taekwondo tournaments, or even myself, like, you don't know what happens to them later. They're from different schools. They either get up and they leave, or they get taken out in a stretcher, and then you don't hear about them again unless it's someone from your own school. But then it's someone else who knocked them out. That then you don't know who knocked them out, really. It's not personal. You just know, like, someone got knocked out. And then you visit them or whatever, that, you know. So, but I wasn't used to that. And but basically that was it. That was my first knockout with a wheel kick in Holland. Even though it wasn't bouncing, it was how I started doing these kicks on the street, basically in street fights. And I've been already doing spin kicks forever, but I didn't trust them in street fights, basically, and for good reason, for the same reason a lot of people don't, you know. And I don't recommend you should use them, honestly. I'm not going to say, oh, you guys should wheel kick. Wheel kicks are hard. They're difficult to do by themselves, and they're even harder to pull off in a fight. They're hard to pull off without getting kicked or punched or slipping. There's a lot of factors that go into wheel kicks. The only reason why they work for me here is because they don't expect it, and I've modified it in a way that it works for me against them here. It doesn't mean it will work everywhere for everyone, you know. I made it work because I'm a fan of spin kicks. I've always been. Like, I saw Roadhouse.
Help! Somebody! These drunk redneck truckers are trying to have their way with me!
Roadhouse, saw Van Damme movies, big Van Damme fan, big Roadhouse fan, so I always wanted to be able to do that kind of shit in real life. I mean, that's the honest truth.
Not while my scrotum is pressed up against my stomach in these jeans, they won't.